Mick and Mairead Philpott, parents who, together with a family friend, Paul Mosley, are jointly accused of the manslaughter of their 6 children. Every day of this trial they've been brought to court and have sat in the same dock as prosecutors have alleged that they started the fire at their family home deliberately in an effort to frame Mick Philpott's former mistress, with whom he was contesting the custody of their 4 children.
They say every child deserves a parent, but not every parent deserves a child. And in today's case, that couldn't be more heartbreakingly true, because Mick Philpott didn't see his children as precious lives to protect. No, he saw them as income, as tools to fuel his greed, bringing in government benefits he felt entitled to.
My wife, Mairead.
Hello, Mairead.
This is going to sound strange. This is my second wife, Lisa.
Hello, Lisa. How have you got 2 wives? They don't allow it in this country.
Well, no, but I class them as 2 wives.
I see.
If the country don't like it, it's tough.
Right.
But his twisted motives didn't stop there. Philpott was a fame-hungry narcissist, diagnosed as a psychopath, and the lives he destroyed went far beyond his own.
Family and friends of Mick and Mairead reacted angrily as the pair was sentenced. One family member shouted, "Die, Mick, die." His sister spoke outside of the courtroom.
Yes. Lisa on the children! Victory today! They've gone down!
Go on, what are your thoughts?
That's it.
The judge called it an unprecedented case with Mick Philpott as the driving force and said that mercifully the children's deaths were swift and it would appear without pain.
This is the horrifying story of how Mick Philpott, alongside his accomplices, took the lives of 6 innocent children. And the deeper you go, the darker it gets. Let's begin.
I've actually been down to our home, and what we saw, we just cannot believe it.
Mick Philpott was born in 1956 in Derby, England. His name would become infamous for one chilling reason. He fathered 17 children, not out of love, but control. If you think that number reflects a deep affection for family, think again. Philpott was neither nurturing nor caring. He was violent, volatile, and manipulative from the very beginning. The pattern of abuse began early. At just 19, he began dating a 15-year-old girl named Kim Hill. At first, Kim saw him as charming, even ideal. But behind the charm lurked something terrifying. It didn't take long before his true nature showed. He turned abusive, physically, emotionally, and psychologically, and it wasn't in private. Philpott didn't care who was watching. In one shocking incident at a local pub, he struck Kim in the face with a pool cue. She bled profusely, yet no one dared to step in. The fear he instilled in others was paralyzing, but that was just the beginning. Philpott's excuses for violence were as senseless as the abuse itself. One day, when Kim gave too much attention to a baby she was caring for, he shattered her arm and fractured her kneecap with a hammer. Yes, a hammer. He was in the British Army at the time, but even military structure didn't tame his rage. Whenever he returned from postings, he'd accuse Kim of cheating without reason, then beat her. One time, simply because he thought her dress was too short, he shot her in the groin with a crossbow. Still just a schoolgirl, Kim would lie about her injuries to protect him. But after 2 brutal years, in July 1978, she finally gathered the courage to end things. She wrote Philpott a breakup letter. But what came next was beyond anyone's worst nightmare. Philpott went AWOL from the army. He broke into Kim's home while she was sleeping and stabbed her 27 times with a 9-inch knife. As she bled, he whispered chilling words, "If I can't have you, no one will." When Kim's mother rushed in to help, Philpott turned on her too, stabbing her 11 times. Somehow, both women survived. Kim's mother, despite her critical injuries, managed to crawl to a phone and call for help. When paramedics arrived, they found Philpott casually standing on the stairs, still holding the blood-soaked knife. He coldly muttered, "I wouldn't bother. She's a goner. I've done a good job on her." Kim died twice, once in the ambulance and again on the operating table. She suffered collapsed lungs, a punctured bladder, kidney, and liver. Her stomach had been slit open, her arms and legs stabbed repeatedly. Philpott later claimed self-defense, but the evidence painted a clear, horrifying picture. The court found him guilty of attempted murder and grievous bodily harm. He was sentenced to 7 years and 2 months in prison, But unbelievably, he was released after just 3 years and 2 months for good behavior, a slap on the wrist for an almost deadly rampage, and no real reason to change. In fact, from behind bars, Philpott wrote Kim letters claiming he was sorry, proposing marriage, as if his apologies could erase the trauma. But this was just the beginning of a long and horrifying descent into darkness. Even after 4 decades, Kim Hill is still haunted by the trauma Mick Philpott inflicted. She continues to receive counseling to this day, and when asked about her past, her words are chilling. You don't say no to Mick Philpott. He doesn't understand the word. By 1986, Philpott had been released from prison, and the cycle of abuse resumed almost instantly. He married a woman named Pamela Lomax, and together they had 3 children. But fatherhood did nothing to tame him. The abuse continued behind closed doors. Pamela lived in constant fear. She knew what he had done to Kim, and instead of feeling safe in her marriage, she silently hoped he'd move on to someone else. And disturbingly, he did. In 1993, Mick Philpott, then 37 years old, began grooming a 14-year-old girl named Heather Kehoe. When Pamela found out about the relationship, she left him, but Heather, still a child herself, believed Philpott's lies. On her 16th birthday, Heather ran away from home and straight into his arms. The two would go on to have 2 sons, but instead of building a family, Philpott built a prison. He abused Heather regularly. When she didn't give birth to a baby girl, he beat her. He even encouraged his older sons to treat her with the same violence and cruelty. Heather said Philpott was obsessed with having more children. When she failed to conceive again, he punished her, locking her outside in the garden like an animal. She told police that one night, as she tried to leave him, he held a knife to her throat. Eventually, she found the strength to escape. Climbing over the backyard fence, she fled, forced to leave her children behind, at least for a while. It would take a long, painful court battle, but she eventually regained custody. Looking back, Heather described Philpott as a classic Jekyll and Hyde, charming at first, but hiding a monstrous rage beneath the surface. In 2000, Philpott met 19-year-old Mairead Duffy. She was a single teenage mother trying to rebuild her life after leaving an abusive relationship. To her, Philpott seemed like a savior. She called him her guardian angel. Soon after they met, he moved in with her, took responsibility for her child, and even proposed right there in the hospital, after Mairead gave birth to their first child, Jade. But the fairy tale would not last long. By the following year, Philpott had started a second relationship, this time with 16-year-old Lisa Willis, an orphan and single mother. She became his mistress and moved into the same home, with Mairead still living there. What happened next was as bizarre as it was disturbing. Both young women, likely influenced by Philpott's manipulative control, formed a close bond. Lisa even said she loved Mairead's children as her own. But behind that closeness, something darker was brewing. A pattern was now undeniable. All 3 women in Philpott's life, Kim, Heather, Mairead, had been teenagers when he met them. Each one vulnerable, each one groomed. In May 2003, Mick Philpott married Mairead. Lisa served as her bridesmaid, and from that moment on, the 3 lived together, along with their children, in a cramped 3-bedroom council house. But here's the most twisted part. Both women worked. Philpott didn't. He stayed home, collecting their wages and hoarding government benefits like a king on a throne built from exploitation. His obsession? Having more children, not for love, but for profit. He applied for a larger council home to fit his growing family. But when the request was denied, that's when things began spiraling toward an unthinkable tragedy.
Mairead married Mick in 2003.
Will you take Mairead Caroline to be your wife? Will you love her, comfort her?
Mick Philpott never once hid who he was. In fact, he paraded his controversial lifestyle in public, almost as if he was proud of it. Criticism? He brushed it off. He believed the system had failed him, not the other way around. Philpott blamed the council for not giving his family a bigger home. He insisted that as an unemployed man with a large household, he deserved more assistance, more benefits, and more recognition. But when he didn't get what he wanted, he took things to the media. In 2007, he appeared on The Jeremy Kyle Show, a British talk show known for explosive confrontations, similar to The Jerry Springer Show in the U.S. Philpott saw this as his moment, but instead of gaining sympathy, he quickly became defensive. When questioned about his joblessness and parenting, his mood shifted. He grew agitated, angry even, and an argument erupted between him and host Jeremy Kyle right there on live television. Trying to justify himself, Philpott claimed he'd had a vasectomy, and when challenged, he responded with pure defiance, making an offensive hand gesture and snarling, "Talk to that, pal! Talk to that!" The audience was stunned, but Philpott wasn't done yet. He introduced both his wife Mairead and his so-called second wife, Lisa Willis. He openly acknowledged their bizarre living arrangement as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He said he didn't care what the public thought. He was proud of his choices, proud of his large family, proud of the benefits rolling in. Philpott even declared, on national television, that he was willing to divorce Mairead, marry Lisa, then divorce her, just so she wouldn't feel left out for not carrying the Philpott family name. And it didn't stop there. He went on to have 2 more children, pushing the household even further into chaos. Soon, newspapers labeled him Britain's biggest scrounger. The public was outraged when it was revealed he was raking in nearly $25,000 a year in government benefits, all while refusing to work. But here's what really stung. Despite all his efforts to gain public sympathy and pressure the council into giving him a larger home, his plan failed. And that rejection would become a turning point, one that led to a tragedy no one could have imagined.
Today I want to discover the man behind the headlines and uncover the truth about the guy who has been branded Britain's biggest scrounger.
Listen, you're going to criticise my family, pal, and my kids. I'll criticise you as much as I want.
Sorry,
this is a free country.
In 2007, Mick Philpott once again found himself in front of the cameras. This time, he was featured in a documentary series where Conservative MP Anne Widdecombe spent a week living with him, hoping she could persuade him to change his life. But what she witnessed was far worse than she imagined. Widdecombe didn't just observe, she tried to help. She went as far as lining up 3 different jobs for Philpott, including one with a barrel-making company. It was a real opportunity to start over, but Philpott didn't even show up for his first day. Just like that, the job vanished, and with it, any hope that he might actually want to change. The documentary revealed the strange and disturbing setup of his home life. Philpott wasn't sleeping inside the house. He was living in a caravan parked in his own backyard, and every night, either his wife or his mistress would take turns sleeping with him there. To the outside world, it might have looked bizarre, but inside it was much darker than anyone could see. Widdecombe was blunt in her assessment. She said Philpott cared for no one, not even his children. She noted how he used vile, degrading language to describe both his wife and his mistress, and most heartbreakingly, none of his children ever sought affection from him. Not a hug, not a kind word, nothing. That silence said it all. Many viewers were left asking the same question. Why? Why did these women stay with him? Why did they tolerate it, or worse, desire it? To the public, it seemed like his partners got along just fine. But behind the curtain of that chaotic household, tensions were quietly simmering. And soon, those tensions would erupt into something truly catastrophic.
I've got my kids and I've got my family. That's all I care about. Nothing else.
Go and see so then. Go and see so then.
Can I just get if I could get the distribution of children right? Is that right?
3 with my first marriage.
Yeah.
2 with another young lady. 5 with Mairead.
Yeah.
4 with Lisa. And 1 with another young lady. And
Right.
2 on the way.
That's 15 now,
Plus
2 on the way.
Plus 1 when I was in the armed services, which I've never met.
Mick Philpott's obsession with control ran so deep, he once asked Mairead to divorce him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, just so he could marry Lisa. To him, relationships were about possession, not love. And behind closed doors, that control turned violent. In 2010, Philpott received a police caution after he slapped Mairead and dragged her outside by her hair. But Lisa didn't escape his wrath either. He struck her with a piece of wood, threw scalding coffee at her, and tightly restricted her life, forbidding her from leaving the house or even speaking to other men. By early 2012, Lisa had reached her breaking point. Trapped in a toxic home, she began planning her escape in silence. In February, she told Mairead she was taking her 5 children swimming, but instead she fled, moving in with her sister. It was the only way she could leave without triggering another explosive confrontation. Philpott, however, wasn't about to let her go quietly. 3 months later, he was still consumed with rage. Caught in a bitter custody battle over the 5 children he'd once controlled, his fury and greed began to morph into something truly unthinkable. What happened next shocked the entire nation. Desperate to regain custody, and with it, more benefit payments and the chance to get a bigger council house, Philpott, Mairead, and a family friend named Paul Mosley devised a plan so vile, so twisted, it's hard to even imagine. They decided to burn down their own home, with their 6 children inside. The goal? To frame Lisa. They timed the fire for the day before the custody hearing, believing that if Philpott appeared to heroically rescue the children, he would win the court's favor. The media would praise him, the system would reward him. But this wasn't just delusional, it was deadly. In the early hours of May 11, 2012, at precisely 4:09 a.m., the plan was set in motion. Philpott and Mosley poured petrol through the mail slot and set the house ablaze. But the fire didn't behave as expected. It moved faster and fiercer than they ever imagined. The flames tore through the home, engulfing the rooms where the children slept. Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, and Jayden all died at the scene. Their half-brother Duwayne clung to life for 2 more days before passing away in the hospital. 6 children, gone, all lost to the smoke that filled their lungs long before flames reached their beds. Investigators later revealed that temperatures in the upstairs bedrooms had soared beyond 500 degrees Celsius, conditions far beyond survivable. Police confirmed what many feared. The fire had been deliberately set with petrol. It was officially ruled as arson, and the deaths of 6 innocent children were classified as murder. But what came next would expose just how deep this evil ran.
Yeah, but we've got the police on the way. Have you any idea what's caused the fire? I've no idea.
All of the children involved in this heartbreaking tragedy were the biological children of Mairead and Mick Philpott, except for Duwayne, who was Mairead's teenage son from a previous relationship. Jade, only 10 years old, was known for her intelligence and was highly respected at school. 9-year-old John was always smiling, cheerful, kind, and polite to everyone he met. Jayden, just 5, adored cuddles and clung lovingly to the people around him. Jack, 7, was the quiet soul of the family, a gentle presence who brought calm to the chaos. 6-year-old Jesse had the loudest laugh and the brightest energy, and Duwayne, the eldest at only 13, carried the weight of responsibility like a true protector, watching over his younger siblings with care well beyond his years. The community was shattered. No one could begin to understand how a father could commit such an unthinkable act. Neighbors, friends, even those who had simply crossed paths with Philpott defended him, believing the stories of his love for his kids. One local, Bobby Sutherland, was so deeply moved that he started a charity to help cover the funeral costs for the 6 children. Holding back tears outside the scorched family home, he said, "Yeah, they can slag him off, but he loved his kids. Yeah, you make mistakes, but you don't deserve that. Nobody does." But those heartfelt words only highlighted how masterfully Philpott had manipulated those around him. His public image as a devoted father and husband had fooled nearly everyone. At first, suspicion fell on Lisa Willis and her brother-in-law, but it didn't take long for investigators to clear their names completely. All eyes soon turned back toward Philpott. People started noticing something deeply unsettling. For a man who had just lost 6 of his children, Philpott's behavior was odd, cold, even playful. Witnesses claimed he seemed to enjoy the media spotlight more than he grieved, A mortuary manager shared a disturbing moment. Philpott, while visiting the bodies of his children, began goofing around and even put a family liaison officer in a headlock. Police, now growing more suspicious, arranged a press conference. Philpott and Mairead appeared together in front of the cameras. Philpott thanked everyone for their support. He even announced that Duwayne's organs would be donated to save another child's life. On the surface, it looked like a father trying to do good in the face of unspeakable loss. But beneath the surface, something darker was taking shape. What truly raised alarms was Philpott's behavior after the cameras stopped rolling. One female officer later revealed that he flirted with her, called her gorgeous, and suggested she come back to his hotel. For investigators, that moment confirmed their worst fears. Mick Philpott wasn't grieving, he was performing. And behind that performance was something far more sinister. The cracks were beginning to show.
And we can't express our gratitude to everybody that's been concerned with the case, with what's been going on. I've actually been down to our home, and what we saw, we just cannot believe it. We grew up in a community that's had a lot of problems with violence and God knows what else, and to see this community to come together like they have, it's just too overwhelming.
The evidence against the Philpotts began to mount, and what investigators uncovered was nothing short of chilling. Near the charred remains of their family home, police discovered a discarded petrol container and a glove. That alone raised suspicion. But it was what they found next that left no room for doubt. By November, forensic teams confirmed it. Traces of petrol were found on the clothing of both Mick Philpott and Paul Mosley. The fire hadn't just been an accident, it had been set deliberately. Determined to gather more information, police made a calculated move. They installed covert recording devices, one in a police vehicle, another inside the hotel room where the suspects were staying. What those recordings captured would change everything. In private, Philpott let his guard down. The tapes caught him making damning statements, admissions he couldn't take back. At one point, he confessed, "It was my fault we lost the children and family." And then, with chilling resolve, he asked, "You're definitely sticking with the story? I didn't mean to do it. On my life." But that wasn't all. In an almost surreal moment captured on the recording, Philpott was heard encouraging his wife, Mairead, as she engaged in a Sewell act with their accomplice, Paul Mosley. His words? "I'm proud of you, because you didn't want to do it." The recordings weren't just evidence, they were a window into a twisted mind and into a plan more disturbing than anyone had imagined.
What you said to me? What you said about how many times I went up ladders?
I lost count how many times I went up the ladders.
What did you say about me trying to get in?
You tried everything you could to get in. Like I said to him, I wanted to run through the flames up the stairs.
Would you cry when you were saying it? How bad?
Not really, really bad, but I did cry.
That's hysterical. Let your bed down. You want Lisa. It's my fault that half the family's gone. It's my fault we lost our children. It's my fault we lost the other five children. It's my fault we lost Lisa. I should have seen it all coming up. It is my fault.
There's a fingerprint on the window.
That's it. A few discrepancies. That's all it is. When we shake it back, I said, "Oh, we're going to go out for a drive at night." I can't remember saying that. Vicky said you were stoned. That's it, brilliant.
During his police interview, Paul Mosley made a disturbing confession. He revealed that he had engaged in SEC with Mairead Philpott on a snooker table just hours before the deadly fire. And shockingly, it wasn't a spontaneous act. Investigators believe Mick Philpott had encouraged it, a twisted tactic to keep Mosley loyal to their plan. Even more unsettling, Mick himself later admitted to having 3 or 4 sexual encounters involving both his wife and Mosley, not long after the deaths of his own children. It was behavior that stunned even the most seasoned detectives. But the recordings weren't the only damning evidence. At the back of the house, investigators found an unused ladder, likely meant to stage a fake rescue, part of a cruelly calculated cover-up. The noose was tightening. On May 28, 2012, both Mick and Mairead Philpott were arrested on suspicion of murder. Just 2 days later, they were formally charged. The investigation then turned to Moseley, and on November 5, 2012, he too was arrested after forensic tests detected petrol on his clothes. It didn't end there. Incredibly, Moseley had been boasting about his role in the case, even on online dating sites, telling people he was a suspect. Whether out of arrogance or fear, he couldn't seem to stay quiet. Philpott appeared determined to keep Moseley under control. Investigators suspected coercion played a major role in keeping him involved. Eventually, in December, the murder charge against Moseley was reduced to manslaughter. As for Mick and Mairead, their murder charges were also downgraded. Evidence revealed they hadn't set out to kill their children, but they had plotted to frame Mick's ex, Lisa, for endangering the family. The motive? A bitter custody battle, mixed with something even darker. More children meant more welfare benefits, and possibly a bigger house. That chilling detail painted a picture of a motive driven not just by revenge, but by greed. On April 2, 2013, the jury delivered their verdict. Mick Philpott, Mairead Philpott, and Paul Moseley were all found guilty of manslaughter in the deaths of the 6 children. Mick received a life sentence with a minimum term of 15 years. Mairead and Moseley were each handed 17-year sentences, with at least 8.5 years to be served behind bars. Mairead would go on to appeal her sentence, but the court didn't budge. Judges ruled her original term was appropriate, given the unimaginable suffering she helped cause. The Court of Appeal made it clear petrol on her clothes proved she took part in setting the fire. This wasn't a moment of panic, it was a cold, premeditated act. She lied to police after her arrest and continued to deceive during her trial. In her sentencing, Justice Thirlwall made a haunting observation. The fire may have been Mick's idea, but Mairead's children died because she chose to stand by him.
We therefore have come to the view that this sentence cannot be criticised. The judge was careful in reaching the conclusion she did. She gave very cogent and clear reasons for it. She assessed against her primary findings of fact the blameworthiness of Mairead Philpott and arrived at a sentence that reflected that very severe degree of blameworthiness, together with the immeasurable harm she had caused by the killing of her 6 children, for whom, like any other mother, she had an absolute responsibility. We have, after an examination of the circumstances and a careful consideration of the judge's remarks, come to the conclusion without any hesitation that this appeal must be dismissed.
In November of 2020, after serving just half of her prison sentence, Mairead Philpott walked free. She was quietly transferred under police escort to a halfway house, eligible for release on license. But the way it happened sparked national outrage. One insider described her treatment as something more fitting for a celebrity than for a mother convicted in the deaths of her own 6 children. And if that wasn't unsettling enough, Mairead was also granted a brand new identity, all in the name of her protection. The Center for Crime Prevention didn't hold back. They called her release appalling, arguing that anyone responsible for such a tragedy should serve their full sentence, no exceptions. The public echoed that anger, wondering how someone at the center of one of the UK's worst child deaths could walk free so soon. Paul Moseley, too, saw his release. In May 2021, he was let out of prison after serving just half of his sentence. But freedom didn't last long. A year later, in 2022, Moseley was back behind bars after breaching the conditions of his parole. Still, the system gave him yet another chance. He was released again in November 2023. The parole board tried to justify the decision. They stated that continued imprisonment was no longer necessary to protect the public, but that explanation brought little comfort to a community still haunted by what happened in Derby. As of now, only one of them remains in prison, Mick Philpott. Still serving his minimum 15-year sentence, Philpott has become a symbol of everything that went wrong in this case. He was a controlling, abusive man, known to manipulate women and use the welfare system for personal gain. Children, to him, weren't a blessing. They were a paycheck. Psychologist Glenn Wilson didn't mince words. He diagnosed Philpott as a clinical psychopath, an exhibitionist with a dangerous antisocial personality disorder. He was never just a troubled man. He was a calculated manipulator with no remorse. So now the question is yours to answer. Do you think justice was truly served? Did Mairead and Moseley deserve early release after the lives that were lost? Should Philpott have faced harsher punishment, especially given his violent history, including an attempted murder conviction in the 1970s? And most haunting of all, could those 6 children have been saved if the system had acted sooner? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want more heartbreaking and eye-opening true crime documentaries like this, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, this is the Zoe Zone, bringing you the stories that must be told.